He was born into one of Britain's most glamorous families, tied by blood to a woman who would one day be crowned queen. He could have spent his entire life at parties on yachts, surrounded by famous beauties, and for a while he did exactly that. But one blistering afternoon in India, he looked into the eyes of a starving, chained elephant, and something inside him broke open. From that moment, the playboy vanished, and a very different man took his place. This is the true story of Mark Shand, the aristocrat who walked away from the glittering life to save a creature the modern world was quietly forgetting. It is a story of adventure, of love in the most unexpected form, and of an ending that no one, not even the royal family, ever saw coming. Mark Rowland Shand came into the world in 1951, the youngest of 3 children born to Major Bruce Shand, a decorated war hero turned wine merchant, and his wife Rosalind. His eldest sister was named Camilla, and their middle sister was Annabel. The 3 grew up between an elegant 18th-century country house in Plumpton, East Sussex, and a family home in South Kensington, London. It was a warm, close-knit childhood, unusually affectionate for an aristocratic family of that era, and the bond between Mark and his sisters would last a lifetime. But young Mark was restless in a way school could not contain. Charming, reckless, and allergic to rules, he was expelled from Milton Abbey School in Dorset after he was caught smoking cannabis. His father, hoping a taste of hard labor might tame him, packed him off to Australia to earn his own living. On the way, Mark stopped in India, and that single detour would echo through the rest of his life. He returned eventually, but not reformed. Through the 1970s, he became one of London's most talked-about young men, a fixture of the international jet set. He worked odd jobs, from laboring in Australia to portering at the auction house Sotheby's, but it was his social life that drew attention. Handsome and magnetic, he dated some of the most desirable women of the age, including Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of the late American President John F. Kennedy. He danced through the Studio 54 era, moving easily among the famous and the beautiful. To the outside world, he seemed a man with everything and no particular purpose, a golden boy coasting on privilege and good looks. Few could have guessed that beneath the playboy shine was a man searching for something he could not yet name. That search would eventually pull him thousands of miles from the ballrooms of London into the dust and heat of rural India, toward a companion no one in his glamorous circle could have predicted. In 1988, Mark Shand traveled to India on what began as little more than an adventurous whim. He had decided, half on impulse, that he wanted to buy an elephant and ride it across the country. Word spread, and soon offers were arriving. With the help of a local nobleman, he found her, a thin, mistreated female elephant who had been used for begging. The moment he saw her, something shifted. He later described how his mouth went dry and he simply knew he had to have her. He named her Tara. What followed was one of the great modern travel stories. Mark set out to ride Tara roughly 800 miles, from Konark on the eastern coast to the Sonpur Mela in Bihar, the oldest elephant market in the world. He had never been a mahout, and at first he barely knew how to sit on her. A weathered, drink-worn elephant driver named Bim taught him how to ride and care for her, while his friend Aditya Patinkar taught him the customs and rhythms of India itself. The journey was grueling and often chaotic. Man and elephant crossed packed highways and forgotten back roads, passed through jungle where tigers still roamed, and stopped each night in villages where crowds gathered simply to stare at the strange Englishman on his elephant. Tara, once a sad and ill-treated beggar, slowly transformed into the star of the show. She had a mischievous streak that delighted everyone. She would shoplift fruit from market stalls with her trunk and pull pranks that left villagers roaring with laughter. But the real transformation happened inside Mark. Mile after mile, he fell completely in love with Tara. He came to see that elephants were not dumb beasts, but sensitive, intelligent creatures with personalities and moods. He noticed how she picked sharp stones from the path to show him why she was walking slowly, and moments like that undid every assumption he had ever carried. By the end, hardened mahouts accepted him as one of their own, and the bond between the aristocrat and his elephant had become something close to a true friendship. When the journey finally ended and the time came to part from Tara, Mark was heartbroken. He turned the experience into a book, Travels on My Elephant, published in the early 1990s. It became a bestseller and won him the Travel Writer of the Year award, transforming the former playboy into a celebrated author. Yet the book was more than a success on paper. It planted a seed that would consume the rest of his life, because Mark could not forget Tara, and he could not forget how quickly her kind was vanishing from the earth. The elephant that changed Mark Shan's life would not let him return to his old one. Long after the journey ended, he remained haunted by a single, painful fact. The Asian elephant was running out of living space, its forests carved up and destroyed. The man who had once drifted through parties now had a purpose that burned in him. In 2002, he channeled that fire into founding a charity called Elephant Family, dedicated to protecting the Asian elephant and the shrinking wild corridors it needed to survive. He threw himself into the cause with the same reckless energy he had once spent on pleasure. He wrote more acclaimed books, including Queen of the Elephants and River Dog, A Journey Down the Brahmaputra River. He organized extravagant, star-studded fundraising events, transforming his gift for glamour into a weapon for conservation. The parties of his youth had been about being seen. Now they raised serious money to save a species. Friends often marveled at how completely he had changed. The playboy had become one of the most effective conservationists in Britain. His personal life, too, had shifted. In 1990, he married Cleo Goldsmith, a French former actress who belonged to one of Britain's wealthiest and most influential families. Together, they had a daughter, Aisha, whom Mark adored. Though his marriage would not last forever, his devotion to his daughter and his cause never wavered. Through all of it, Mark stayed remarkably close to his sister Camilla. As she navigated the storms of her own extraordinary life, the intense public scrutiny, the long and painful road to becoming part of the royal family, her younger brother remained one of her steadiest sources of comfort. Those who knew them said that part of what drew Camilla and Prince Charles together was that Mark and Charles shared so much: a deep love of India, of Hinduism, of conservation and the natural world. The future king and the wandering conservationist spoke the same language, and the family bond ran deep. By the early 2010s, Mark Shand had reinvented himself completely in the eyes of the world. He was no longer merely Camilla's brother or a fading society name. He was an author, an explorer, and a passionate defender of one of the planet's most magnificent animals. He had taken a life that could have amounted to nothing more than privilege and glamour and turned it into something meaningful. He was tireless, still traveling, still raising money, still fighting for the elephants he loved. To his family and friends, he seemed unstoppable, a man in the fullest, richest chapter of his life. No one had any reason to believe that chapter was about to end. But the very cause that had given him purpose would place him, on one spring night in New York, at the center of a tragedy that would leave the royal family in mourning. In April 2014, Mark Shand was in New York City doing exactly what had defined the second half of his life: raising money for elephants. That evening, an auction held for his charity had been a triumph, gathering close to £1 million for the cause he loved most. He was 62 years old, celebrated, energetic, and at the height of his conservation work. By every measure, it should have been a night of quiet victory. Late in the evening, outside the Gramercy Park Hotel, Mark stepped out and lit a cigarette. In a moment that lasted only seconds, he fell and struck his head. The injury was catastrophic. He was rushed to Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan, but the damage was too severe. On 23 April 2014, Mark Shand died from his injuries. A single ordinary movement, a stumble on a New York street, had ended a life that had been so full of adventure and reinvention. The news struck like a thunderbolt. His daughter Aisha lost her father. His sisters lost the brother they had loved since childhood. For Camilla, the loss was especially cruel. She had already buried her mother and father, and now her beloved younger brother, the boy she had grown up with in Sussex, the man who had stood beside her through every public storm, was gone. Prince William and his wife, Catherine, publicly expressed their sadness, and tributes poured in from around the world, from conservationists to old friends who remembered his wild charm and his enormous heart. A week later, mourners gathered in Dorset for his funeral. Camilla led the family in grief, and Prince Charles stood beside her as they said goodbye to the man who had shared their love of India and the wild. It was a private, painful farewell for a public family, and the sorrow on their faces was unmistakable. But Mark Shand's story did not end in that hospital, and the elephants he fought for made sure of it. In the wake of his death, his charity was flooded with support, and a memorial fund was created in his name to continue saving the Asian elephant. Charles and Camilla became joint royal presidents of Elephant Family, carrying his mission forward. In India, a clinic for elephants was built in his memory, a fitting tribute for a man who had given a starving, mistreated animal a second chance. and in doing so, found his own. Mark Shand had been born with every advantage and could have chosen a life of ease. Instead, he chose the dust of India, the friendship of an elephant, and a cause larger than himself. He proved that a person can change completely, that purpose can arrive at any age, and that the love between a man and a single elephant can outlast even death itself. That, in the end, was the true measure of Camilla's remarkable brother.